The complete works of Swami Vivekananda, Volume 2, Jnana Yoga, Section 2, Jnana Yoga, or you can say Jnana Yoga. Chapter 1, The Necessity of Religion, lecture delivered in London. Of all the focus that have worked and are still working to mold the destinies of the human race, none certainly is more potent than that the manifestation of which we call religion. All social organizations have or has a background somewhere, the working of the particular force and the impulse, greatest cohesive impulse even brought into play amongst human units has been derived from this power. It is obvious to all of us that in very many cases the bonds of religions have proved stronger than the bonds of race or climate or even of distance. It is well known fact that persons worshipping the same God, believing in the same religion, has stood by each other with much greater strength and constancy than people of much the same descent or even brothers. Various attempts have been made to trace the beginning of religion in all the accidents or in all the ancient religions which have come that they are all supernaturals and that their genesis is not, as it were, in the human brain, but that they have originated somewhere outside of it. Two theories have gained some acceptance among us modern scholars. One is the spirit theory of religion, the other, the evolution of the idea of infinity. One party maintains that ancestor worship is the beginning of the religion, other that religion originates in the personification of the power of nature. Man wants to keep up the memory of his dead relatives and thinks they are living even when the body is dissolved, and he wants to place food for them and, in certain sense, to worship them. Out of that, all the out of that came the growth of all, or we call religion. Studying the ancient religion of Egyptians, Babylonians, Chinese, and many other races in America and elsewhere, we find very clear traces of this ancestry worship being the beginning of religion. With the ancient Egyptian, the first idea of the soul was that of a double. Every human being contained in it another being very similar to it, and when a man died, this double went out of the body and yet lived one. But the life of the double lasted only so long as the dead body remained intact, and that is why we find among Egyptians so much solicitude to keep the body uninjured, and that is why they build the huge pyramids in which they preserve the bodies. For if any portion of the external body was hurt, the double would be correspondingly injured. This is clearly the ancestry worship. With the ancient Babylonians, we find the same idea of double, but with a variation. The double lose all the sense of love. It frightened the living to give its food and drink and to help in the various ways. It even lost all affection for its own children and its own wife. Among the ancient Hindus, also, we find traces of this ancestry worship. Among the Chinese, the basis of their religion may also be said to be ancestor worship, and it still permeates the length and breadth of the vast country. In fact, the only religion that can really be said to be flourish in China is that of the ancestry worship. Thus, it seems on one hand that a very good position is made out for those who hold the theory of ancestry worship as the beginning of religion. On the other hand, there are scholars who from the ancient Aryan literature shows that religion originated in nature worship. Although in India we find proofs of ancestry worship everywhere, at the oldest record there is no trace of it whatever so. In Rigveda Samhita, most ancient record of Aryan race, we do not find any trace of it. Modern scholars think it is a worship of nature that they find there. The human mind seems to struggle to get a pap between or behind the scenes. The dawn, the evening, the hurricane, the stupendous and the gigantic forces of nature, its beauty, this have exercised the human mind and is inspired to be beyond, to understand something about them. In the struggle, they will endow these phenomena with personal attributes, giving them soul and bodies, sometimes beautiful, sometimes transcendent. Every attempt ends by these phenomena becoming abstraction, whether the personalized or not. So also it is found with the ancient Greek, their whole mythology is simply this abstracted nature worship. So also with the ancient German and the Scandinavians and all the other Aryan races. Thus, on this side too, a very strong case has been made out that religion has its origin in the personification of the power of nature. These two views, though they seem to be contradictory, can be reconciled on the third basis, which, to my mind, is the real germ of the religion, and that I propose to call the struggle of transcend the limitations of the senses. Either man goes to seek for the spirit of his ancestors, the spirit of the death, that is, he wants to get a glimpse of what there is after body is dissolved, or he desires to understand the power working behind the stupendous phenomena of nature. Whichever of this is the case, one thing is certain that he tries to transcend the limitations of the senses. He cannot remain satisfied with his senses. He wants to go beyond them. The explanation need not be mysterious. To me, it seems very natural that the glimpse of the religion should come through dreams. The first idea of immortality men may well get through dreams. Is that not the most wonderful state? And we know that children's an untutorial mind find very little difference between the dreaming and their awakening state. What can be more natural than that they find has a natural logic that even during the sleep state, when the body is apparently dead, the mind goes on with all its intricate workings. That what wonder that man will at once come to the conclusion that when this body is dissolved forever, the same working will go on. This to my mind would be the more natural explanation of the supernatural, and through this dream idea, the human mind rises to higher and higher conceptions. Of course, in time, the vast majority of mankind found out that these dreams are not verified by their waking states, and that during the dream state it is not that man has a fresh existence, but simply that he recapitulates the experiences of the awakened state. But by this time the search had begun, and the search was inward, and the man continued inquiring more deeply into the different stages of mind and discovered higher states than either the waking or the dreaming. This state of things we find in all the organized religions of the world, called necessary ecstasy or inspirations. In all organized religions, their founders, prophets, and messengers are declared to have gone into state of mind that were neither waking nor sleeping, in which they came face to face with the new series of facts relating to what is called a spiritual kingdom. They realize things there much more intensely than we realize fact around us in our waking state. Take, for instance, the religion of the Brahmins. The Vedas are said to be written by rishis. These rishis were sages who realized certain facts. The exact definition of the Sanskrit words rishi is the seer of mantras, of the thoughts conveyed in the Vedic hymns. These men declared that they had realized, sensed, if that word can be used with regard of the supersensuous, certain facts, and these facts they proceeded to put on record. We find the same truth declared amongst both the Jews and the Christians. Some exception may be taken in the case of the Buddhist, as represented by the southern sect. It may be asked, if the Buddhists do not believe in any god or soul, how can their religion be derived from the supersensuous state of existence? The answer to this is that even the Buddhists find an internal moral law, and that moral law was not reasoned out in our sense of the word. But Buddha found it, discovered it in a supersensuous state. Those of you who have studied the life of Buddha, even as briefly given in the beautiful poem The Light of Asia, may remember that Buddha is represented as sitting under the bo tree until he reaches that supersensuous state of mind. All these teachings come through this and not through intellectual cognition. Thus, the tremendous statement is made by all religions that the human mind at certain moment transcend not only the limitations of the senses but also the power of reasoning. It then comes face to face with fact which it would never have sensed, would never have reasoned out. These facts are the basis of all the religions of the world. Of course, we have the right to challenge this fact, to put them to the test of reason. Nevertheless, all the existing religions of the world claim for the human mind this particular peculiar power of transcending the limit of the senses and the limit of reasons. And this power they put forward has a statement of fact. Apart from the consideration of the question how far these facts claimed by religions are true, we find one characteristic common to them all. They are all abstractions on the contrasted with the concrete discovery of physics, for instance, and in all the highly organized religion, they take the purest form of the unit abstract, either in the form of the abstracted presence as an omnipresent being or has an abstract personality called God as a moral law or in the form of the abstract essence underlying every existence. In modern times, too, the attempt made to preach religion without applying to the supersensuous state of mind have had to take up the old abstraction of the ancient and give different names to them as moral law, the ideal unity, and so forth, thus showing this that these abstractions are not in the senses. None of us have yet seen an ideal human being, and yet we are told to believe in it. None of us have yet seen an ideal perfect man, and yet without that ideal we cannot progress. Thus, this one fact stands out from all these different religions, that there is an ideal unit abstraction which is put before us either in the form of person or impersonal being or a law or presence or essence. We are always struggling to raise ourselves up to that ideal. Every human being, whosoever and wheresoever he may be, has an idea of infinite power. Every human being has an idea of infinite pleasure. Most of the works that we find around us, the activities displayed everywhere, are due to the struggle of this infinite power or this infinite pleasure. But the quick, but a few quickly discovery that although they are struggling for infinite power, it is not through the senses that it can be reached. They find out very soon that the infinite pleasure is not to be got through the senses or through the other words. The senses are too limited and the body is too limited to express the infinite. To manifest the infinite through the infinite is possible, and sooner or later, man learns to give up the attempt to express the infinite through the finite. This giving up, this reincarnation of this attempt, is the background of the ethics. Renunciation is the very basic upon which ethics stands. There never was an ethical code preached which had not renunciation for its base. Ethics always say, not I, but thou. Its motto is not self, not but non-self. The vain ideas of the individualism to which man clings when he is trying to find that infinite power or that infinite pleasure through the senses have to be given up, says the law of ethics. You have to put yourself last and others before you. The senses say myself first. Ethics say I must hold myself last. Thus, all code of ethics are based upon the renunciation, destruction, and not construction of the individual on the material plane. That infinite will never find expressions upon the material plane, nor is it possible or thinkable. So, man has to give up the plane of matter and rise to other sphere to seek a deeper expression of that infinite. In this way, the various ethical laws are being molded, but all have that one central idea: eternal self abnegation, perfect self annihilation is the idea of the ethics. People are started if they are asked not to think of their individuality. They seem to so very much afraid of losing what they call their individuality. At the same time, the same men would declare the highest ideas of ethics to be right, never for the moment thinking that the scope, the goal, the idea of all ethics is the destruction and not the building up of the individual. Utili- Utilitarian stance cannot explain the ethical relation of man, for in the first place we cannot derive the supernatural sections as it is called, or the perception of the superconscious as per to term it. There are been no ethics. Without the struggle towards the infinite, there can be no idea. Any system that wants to bind men down to the limits of their own society is not able to find an explanation for the ethical laws of mankind. The utilitarian wants us to give up the struggle after the infinite, the reaching out for the supersensuous as impracticable and absurd, and in the same breath take us to take up ethics and do good to society. Why should we do good? Doing good is a secondary consideration. We must have an idea. Ethics itself is not the end, but the means of the end. If the end is not there, why should we be ethical? Why should I do good to other men and not injure them? If happiness is the goal of mankind, why should I not make myself happy and others unhappy? What prevents me? In the second place, the basis of utility is too narrow. All the current social forms and methods are derived from the society as it exists. But what right has the utilitarian to assume that society is eternal? Society did not exist ages ago, possibly will not exist ages hence. Most probably it is one of the passing stages through which we are going towards the higher evolution, and any law that is derived from society alone cannot be eternal, cannot cover the whole ground of the man's nature. At best, therefore, utilitarian theories can only work under present social conditions. Beyond that, they have no value but a morality, an ethical code derived from religion and spirituality, has the whole of the infinite man for its scope. It takes up the it takes up the individual, but its relation are to be infinite, and it takes up society also, because society is nothing but members of this individual group put together, and as it applies to the individual and his eternal relations, it must necessarily apply to the whole society in whatever condition it may be at any given time. Thus, we see that there is always a necessity of spiritual religion for mankind. Men cannot always think of matter, however pleasurable it may be. It has been said that too much attention to things spiritual to things spiritual disturbance are practical relations in this world. As far back as in the days of Chinese sages, Confucius Sage Confucius, it was said, "Let us take care of this world, and then, when we have finished with this world, we will take care of the other world." It is very well that we should take care of this world, but if too much attention too much attention to the spiritual may affect a little our practical relations. Too much attention to the so called practical hurts us here and hereafter. It makes us materialistic. For man is not to regard nature as his goal, but something higher. Man is man, so long as he is struggling to rise above nature, and this nature is both internal and external. Not only does it comprises the laws that governs the practicals of matter outside us and in our bodies, but also the more subtle nature within, which is in fact the motive power governing the external. It is good and very grand to conquer external nature, but grander still to conquer our internal nature. It is grand and good to know the law of govern the stars and planets. It is infinitely grander and better to know the laws of the on that governs the passion, the feeling, the will, and the mankind. This conquering of inner man, this conquering of inner man, understanding the secret of the subtle working that are within the human mind and knowing its wonderful secret beyond entirely to religion. Human nature, the ordinary human nature, I mean, want to see big material facts. The ordinary man cannot understand anything that is subtle. Well, has it been said that the masses admire the lion that kills the thousand lambs, never for a moment thinking that it is death to the lambs, although the momentary triumph for the lion, because they find pleasure only in the manifestation of the physical strength. Thus it is with the ordinary run of mankind. They understand and find pleasure in everything that is external. But in theirs every society there is a section whose pleasure are not in the senses but beyond, and who now and then catches glimpse of something higher than matter and struggle to reach it. And if we read the history of nations between the lines, we shall always find that the rise of nation comes with an increase in the number of such men, and the fall begins when the pursuit after the infinite, however when utilitarian may call it, has ceased. That is to say, the mainsprings of the strength of every race lies in its spirituality, and the death of the race begins the day that spirituality wanes and the materialism gains ground. Thus, apart from the solid facts and truths that we may learn from religion, apart from the comfort that we may gain from it, religion as a science, as a study, is the greatest and highest exercise that a human mind can have. This pursuits of the infinite, this struggle of grasp the infinite, this effort to get beyond the limitation of the senses, out of the matter as it were, and to evolve the spiritual man. This striving day and night to make the infinite one with our beings. This struggle itself is the grandest and the most glorious that man can make. Some person find the greatest pleasure in eating. We have no right to say they should not. Others find the greatest pleasure in the possessing certain things. We have no right to say that they should not, but they also have no right to say no to the man who finds his highest pleasure in spiritual thoughts. The lower the organization, the greater the pleasure in the senses. We few men can eat a meal with the same gusto or as a dog or a wolf, but all the pleasures of the dog or the wolf have gone, as it were, into the senses. The lower types of humanity is all nations find pleasure in the senses, while the cultured and the educated find it in thought, in philosophy, in art, in science. Spirituality is a still higher plane. The subject being infinite, that plane is the highest, and the pleasure there is the highest for those who can appreciate it. So, even on the utilitarian ground that man is to seek for pleasure, he should cultivate religious thoughts, for it is the highest pleasure that exists. Thus, religion has a study seems to me to be absolutely necessary. We can see it in its effect. It is greatest motive power for that moves the human mind. No other ideas can put into us the same mass of energy as the spiritual. So far as human history goes, it is obvious to all of us that this has been the case, that its power was are not dead. I do not deny that men on simply utilitarian grounds can be very good and moral. There have been many great men in this world perfectly sound, moral and good, simply on utilitarian ground, but the world movers, man who brings as it were a mass of magnetism into the world, whose spirit works in hundreds and in thousands, those whose life ignites others with a spiritual fire, which such men we always find have that spiritual background. Their motive power came from religion. Religion is the greatest motive power for realizing that infinite energy which is birthright and nature of every man. In building up character, in making of everything that is good and great, in bringing peace to others and peace to one own's mind, one own self. Religion is the highest motive power and therefore ought to be studied from that standpoint. Religion must be studied on the broader base than formerly. All narrow, limited, fighting ideas of religion have to go. All sect ideas and tribal or national ideas of religion must be given up, that each tribe or nation should have its own particular god and think that every other is wrong in the superstition that should belong to the past. Such ideas must be abandoned. As the human mind broadens, its spiritual step broadens too. The time has already come when a man cannot record a thought without its reaching to all corners of the earth by merely physical means. We have come into touch with the whole world, so the further religions of the world can have to become as universal as wide. These religious ideas of the future must embrace all that exists in the world and is good and great, and at the same time have infinite scope for future development. All that was good in the past must be preserved, and the doors must be kept open for future additions to the already existing store. Religions must also be inclusive and not look down with contempt upon one another's, because their particular ideas of God are different. In my life I have seen a great many spiritual men, a great many sensible person who did not believe in God at all, that is to say, not in our sense of the words. Perhaps they understood God better than we can ever do. The personal idea of God, or the impersonal, the infinite, moral law, or ideal man, this all have to come under the definition of religion. And when religion have become thus broadened, their power for good will be increased a hundredfold. Religion have tremendous power in them. Religions have tremendous power in them, have often done more injury to the world than good, simply an account of their narrowness and limitations. Even at the present time, we find many sects and societies with almost the same ideas fighting each other because one does not want to set forth those ideas in precisely the same way as another. Therefore, religion will have to be broadened. Religion also will have to become universal, vast, infinite, and then alone we shall have the fullest play of religion. For the power of religion has only just begun to manifest in the world. It is something said that the religions are dying out, the spiritual ideas are dying out of the world. To me, it seems that they have just begun to grow. The power of religion, broadened and pured, is going to penetrate every part of the human life. So long as religion was in the hands of the chosen few or the body of priests, it was in the temple, church, book, dogma and ceremonies, forms and rituals. But when we come to the real, spiritual, universal concept, then and then alone religion will become real and living. It will come into our very nature, live in our every movement, penetrate every pore of our society, and be infinitely more a power for good than it has been before. What is needed is a fellow feeling better and different type of religion, seeing that they all stand or fall together, a fellow feeling which springs from mutual esteem and mutual respect and not the condescending patronizing, niggardly expressions of goodwill, unfortunately in vogue at present time with many. And above all, this is needed between types of religions, expression coming from the study of mental phenomena, unfortunately even now laying conclusive claim to the name of religion, and those expressions of religion whose head, as it were, are penetrating more into the secrets of heaven, though their feet are clinging to earth. I mean, the so called materialistic sciences. To bring about this harmony, both will have to make concessions, sometimes very large, nay more, sometimes painful, but each will find itself the better for the sacrifice and more advanced in truth. And in the end, the knowledge which is confined within the domain of time and space will meet and become one with that which is beyond them both, where the mind and the senses cannot reach the absolute, the infinite, the one without the second. Where the mind and the senses cannot reach the absolute, the infinite, the one without